So we're here to solve this Slitherlink Skyscrapers variation by Priyam Bhushan called Inside Job. I'm going to start by just marking some standard Slitherlink pattern constraints, and these diagonal 0, 3 groups will always have these edges near the 0 filled in, and then even coming further along those diagonals, the 3's into the 1 will always take one of the edges that are just adjacent to those touching cells and not the ones in the outside extremes. The outside corners have this 3, 3, 3, 3 diagonal pattern, which will always have to take these ends, and this end's actually now isolated, so this will have to come in and we get 3 along the outside column. That's going to be the exact same shape over here, so I'll just draw it in straight away. One last Slitherlink constraint it looks like I can use is around the 0, 2 connection, so this will always have a diagonal apparent look. It'll take the left and top edges or the bottom and right edges, with one end coming out this direction and one end coming out this direction, but we can't come up here, so the end is going to come over to the right and join to this 3. So I think that's the start. That's just using the Slitherlink steps given the grid. So let's come back and now think about the skyscraper constraints. And I'll start with this 2 in the first column, and that's because it's already seeing a pretty long section as its first section. So if it's seesawing of size 3 or more, its next group is going to have to be 4 or more. And so we've got a space where we've got 5 segments we could take, and these middle ones will have to be part of this larger section that the 2 will see. And in marking that in, we can see it actually, if we took one more section down here, we'd have 4 plus 4 in the grid, and that's not going to work. So this has to immediately turn to leave a section of size 3. And then we're going to have 4 or 5 in the bottommost section. So this 2 clue will be fine as long as we take one more edge. This 2 and 2 on the left and right of this 9th set of dots is also fairly constraining, in part because we haven't taken any horizontal sections yet. And this has to see 2 distinct groups, something like a 1 and a 2, or larger than that 1, 3, 1, 4, or 2, 3, something like that. But if this has to see a 1 and a 2, and this 2 on the right side also has to see a 1 with a 2, there's just enough space with 6 places to put in a single cell, a gap, 2, a gap, and another 1 to get 1, 2, 1 into the grid. So this is absolutely forced. And in marking that in, we actually see this vertical section again to get a size 4 or larger. We've now fulfilled that column clue in these 2 row clues. Coming now back to the bottom, some clues that look important, like this one and even the one next to it that are vertical skyscraper clues. We know that their largest lengths are going to be 1, and that also means their smallest lengths are going to be 1. Everything in these spaces that comes up one cell will go exactly one cell. So we know, for instance, this has to immediately turn. And also thinking about this clue, when this section comes up 1, it can't come up any further, and so then I'll actually complete the 3 pretty quickly like I just drew in. And again, that's just because of how this skyscraper constraint, seeing a length of size 1, can't see any length that's any longer anywhere in the grid. This lower right side of the grid now looks somewhat limited. This end and this end have to stay apart, and so one end is going to come vertically through near this one clue, but this other end has to come this way. And so there's one form where this end comes this way and another form where it comes this way, but this other side of the loop has to get around and dodge it. Another thing to note is right now we've got an odd number of ends in this right part of the grid. So we've got to get at least one more end into it, and the only end that can still come over here is this end right here. So this end can't join to the left. It's got to still be a free end so that there are an even number of loop ends in the open part of the space. And those markings will get us a lot into the grid to work with. In part, it actually seems one thing it's forcing is going to be some stuff now on the left side of the puzzle as we really work through this, including a constraint by marking this end in that I have too long vertical for what this one clue is seeing, which means I can only see sections of size 2 anywhere before this group. So I can't take just this edge. That would then see too much in the space, but I could conceptually take both of these edges, and in doing that, what we'll see is we actually close off the loop too soon. And so I can't take both of these ends, which means I can't take either of the ends because of how the skyscraper clue works with this top section. And so that puts this into the grid, this loop end here around this 2. A different way we could have seen this to see if this 2 went vertically, we would sort of form too large a section to see two sections overall, but right now where you've marked this in the grid, we can put this in. We see that we see one segment. We need to be able to see a too long segment here to make this clue work. So this has to continue extending up. Coming back, this lower left piece really wants to not close in itself, and that means that this end and this end don't want to come together. One thing I'd note though is if these come like this too now has this kind of diagonal forcing with a forced end out of this, and so the loop always closes on itself. So this edge can't be used. These edges have to stay apart, but now I'm in a space like this where these edges have to stay apart to not close off this loop. That comes over here, this comes over here. I've just made a vertical section where I always have to take at least two anytime I go vertical. So this is forced, and we've got the left side of the grid fully completed, and all these vertical skyscraper clues look good so far. I just put in two long sections for what this one is, which means on both sides of this, everything has to be too long so that this one clue and that one clue work. In this space where I haven't taken anything horizontally yet, I'm going to have to take a 1 with a 2, and that will fulfill the right side and left side clues. This horizontal end doesn't want to come down below, which would close things off too quickly, so it's going to come to the top. This now is forcing the bottom right parts of the loop to come in like this. And there's one clue we haven't looked at all, which is this 2 at the top of the upper right column. That says we have to have at least 2 distinct segments in that whole column. So we've got to not take this segment. And doing that, we can just connect the rest of the loop ends and finish the puzzle. So this is a good combination of some basic Slitherlink patterns and end counting, but then using these skyscraper clues to force the constraints in the middle of the grid, particularly how these two clues gave a lot here, and then all these vertical column clues give a lot of limitations, particularly how we had 1 vertical segment lengths for these spots over here. So I hope you got something through looking through the solve, including how to balance different kinds of logic in a Slitherlink variation, and we'll see you again soon.